The lunar base's warning sirens pierced the artificial night cycle, jolting Captain James Walker from his sleep. He rushed to the command center, his boots clicking against the metal floor. Through the reinforced windows, he saw something that made his heart stop. A fleet of crystalline ships, glowing with an inner light, approaching the moon's surface. "Report," he barked, his eyes fixed on the alien vessels. "Sir, they appeared out of nowhere," Lieutenant Peters said, his fingers flying over the control panel. "No warp signatures, no engine trails. They just materialized." The main screen showed 20 ships, each one looking like a perfect geometric shape carved from diamond. They sparkled in the sunlight, beautiful but terrifying. As Walker watched, smaller crystal fragments broke off from the main ships and headed toward the lunar base. "Battle stations," Walker ordered, knowing full well that their weapons might be useless against these unknown visitors. "Get me Earth Command." Before they could establish communication, a voice filled every speaker in the base. It was neither male nor female, but crystal clear and eerily musical. "We are the Eternal. We bring the gift of preservation to your species." Walker grabbed the comm unit. "This is Captain James Walker of the Earth Defense Force. You are entering restricted space. State your intentions. We have studied your kind for many cycles." The voice continued, ignoring his warning. "Your bodies are fragile. Your lives are brief. We offer perfection." The crystal fragments had landed now, transforming into humanoid figures that walked across the lunar surface. Their bodies were transparent, with rainbow colors shifting through them like oil on water. Base defense turrets activated automatically, firing high-powered plasma bolts at the intruders. The shots passed right through them. "My God," Walker whispered, watching as the crystalline beings absorbed every attack without showing any damage. Where the energy hits should have left scorch marks, their bodies simply rippled and reformed. "Sir," Peters shouted, "they're breaching Airlock 3. Walker grabbed his rifle and ran toward the breach point, joined by a squad of Marines. They arrived just as the airlock's inner door melted away, revealing 3 crystal figures. Their faces were smooth, with only slight indentations where eyes should be. "Stop right there," Walker ordered, knowing it was probably useless. The crystal beings stepped forward. One raised its arm, and a Marine fired. The bullet hit the creature's chest, creating a small hole, which instantly filled back in, like water rushing to fill a gap. "Your weapons cannot harm us," the musical voice echoed through the corridor. "We have evolved beyond such concerns. Soon, you will join us in immortality." Walker watched in horror as one of the beings touched Private Rogers. Crystal began spreading across the young Marine's skin, transforming him. Rogers screamed, then fell silent as the crystallization reached his face. When it was done, a new crystal being stood where Rogers had been. "Fall back," Walker shouted. "Everyone out. Seal the sector." They retreated, sealing emergency bulkheads behind them. Walker's mind raced. These beings couldn't be hurt, could transform humans, and had appeared from nowhere. Earth had to be warned. "Peters, send everything we've recorded to command," he ordered as they reached the command center. "Tell them." He paused, watching as more crystal ships appeared in lunar orbit. "Tell them we're facing something impossible." The musical voice spoke again. "We are eternal. We are Legion. We bring the gift of forever. Your species will be preserved in perfect, unchanging crystal. Resistance will only delay the inevitable." Walker stared at the growing fleet, his jaw set. Humanity had faced threats before, but nothing like this. These beings were immortal, immune to damage, and could convert humans into more of themselves. But something about their perfect, unchanging nature bothered him. Everything in the universe changed. That was a fundamental law. What had these beings given up to achieve their immortality? As the Crystal Army advanced through his base, Walker made a decision. He would find out. And maybe, just maybe, that knowledge would give humanity a chance. "Begin evacuation," he ordered. "But download every scan, Every reading, every piece of data we can get about these things, something can hurt them. We just have to figure out what. The battle for humanity's survival had begun. Dr. Anna Miller watched the video from the lunar base attack for the 100th time. Her small lab in the underground Earth Defense Facility was cluttered with holographic displays, each showing different angles of the crystal beings. Dark circles under her eyes showed she hadn't slept in days. "Play it again," she told the computer. "Slow down frame 2476. The image showed a crystal beam taking a direct hit from a plasma rifle. Miller leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she watched the creature's body ripple like water. "Stop." She jumped up, knocking over her coffee cup. "Computer, enhance the ripple pattern." The patterns within the crystal being's body appeared random at first glance. But Miller saw something else, a familiar wave pattern she'd seen years ago in her quantum physics research. A knock at her lab door interrupted her thoughts. Captain Walker entered, looking as tired as she felt. "Please tell me you found something," he said. "We just lost contact with Mars Colony." Miller nodded, pointing to her screens. "Look at this. When they're hit, they don't just heal. They shift between states, like quantum particles." Walker rubbed his temples. "Doctor, I need this in simple terms. We've lost 3 more bases since the moon." "Okay," Miller said, grabbing a clear glass cube from her desk. "Imagine this cube is one of them. Normal things exist in one state, solid, like this cube. But these beings exist in multiple states at once, like a particle that's both here and there until you measure it." She dropped the cube. It shattered on the floor. "Normal matter breaks," she continued. "But they don't because they're never in just one state. When we hit them with weapons, they simply shift to an undamaged state. They're using quantum mechanics on a massive scale." Walker picked up a piece of the broken cube. "So how do we fight something that can't be broken?" Before Miller could answer, alarms blared through the facility. Walker's radio crackled. "Captain, crystal ships in orbit. They found the base." Walker rushed to the window. Above them, the sky filled with diamond-like shapes descending through the clouds. Base defenses activated, filling the air with plasma bolts and missiles. The crystal ships absorbed every hit, growing brighter with each impact. "They're not just immune to damage," Miller said, watching in horror. "They're absorbing the energy, making themselves stronger." The first crystal beings landed outside the base. Security cameras showed them walking through the outer walls like ghosts, their bodies shifting and flowing around obstacles. Gunfire echoed through the corridors. "We need to evacuate," Walker said, drawing his pistol. "Doctor, grab your research. We can't let them." The lab door melted away. 3 crystal beings stepped through, their bodies pulsing with captured energy from the base's weapons. "Your weapons make us stronger," they said in their musical voice. "Your resistance improves us. Join us in perfection." Walker fired his pistol. The bullets passed through them like they were made of water. Miller stared at the beings, her mind racing. Something about their movement caught her attention. When Walker fired, they shifted states, but for a fraction of a second, they seemed to stabilize, almost like. "Captain," she whispered, "when you shot them, did you see how they changed when you looked at them?" Walker nodded slightly, still aiming his useless weapon at the advancing creatures. "I think I know what might hurt them," Miller said. "But we need to get out of here. I need more tests." Walker threw a flash grenade. The crystal beings paused, momentarily confused by the bright light. He grabbed Miller's arm and ran. "Whatever your idea it is," he said as they sprinted toward the emergency bunker, "it better be good. Because right now, humanity is losing this war." Behind them, the musical voice echoed. "You cannot escape change. You cannot escape perfection." But Miller smiled. She had seen something impossible, and impossible things were her specialty. The underground bunker was crowded with survivors from the base attack. Dr. Miller sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by paper covered with drawings and notes. Captain Walker paced nearby, watching the security feeds showing crystal beings spreading across the city above. "Look at this," Miller said, pointing to a map. "Something strange is happening." Walker knelt beside her. The map showed crystal ship movements across Earth. Red dots marked their attacks, but there were empty spaces, places they completely avoided. "Maybe they're just saving those areas for later," Walker suggested. Miller shook her head. "No. Look closer. They're avoiding these spots like they're afraid of them." She pointed to one particular location, an old physics lab in the mountains. This facility was studying quantum observation effects before the attack. The crystal beings won't go near it. What's so special about it? They were measuring how human consciousness affects quantum particles. Miller's eyes lit up with excitement. "Captain, remember how the crystal beings changed slightly when you looked at them?" Walker nodded slowly. "They seemed to become more solid for just a moment." "Exactly." Miller jumped up, grabbing more papers. "These beings exist in multiple states at once. That's why they can't be killed. But when we observe them, they have to choose one state. It's basic quantum mechanics." A loud explosion shook the bunker. Dust fell from the ceiling. "They're getting closer," Walker said, checking his radio. "Whatever your idea is, make it fast." Miller grabbed her tablet, showing Walker some old research files. "These scientists prove that human consciousness can affect quantum particles. We don't just observe reality. We help create it. What if that's why the crystal beings are afraid of that lab?" Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered. "Doctor," Walker said patiently, "we need weapons, not theories." "This is a weapon." Miller grabbed his arm. "The crystal beings are quantum creatures. They're immortal because they exist in all possible states at once. But human consciousness, human observation, forces quantum particles to pick one state." Walker stared at her. "Are you saying we can hurt them just by looking at them?" "Not exactly. One person's observation isn't enough. But if we could focus the consciousness of hundreds, maybe thousands of people." She let the idea hang in the air. The bunker shook again. Through the security feeds, they watched crystal beings methodically searching the underground tunnels, getting closer to their hideout. "How would we even build something like that?" Walker asked. Miller pointed to her drawings, rough sketches of a device with a central chamber surrounded by smaller pods. "We need to build an observer device, something that can link human minds together and focus their consciousness like a laser." "That's impossible," Walker said. "More impossible than immortal crystal beings that can't be killed." Miller smiled. "The quantum lab already has most of the equipment we need. We just need to reach it." Walker looked at the security feeds again. The crystal beings had found another group of survivors. He watched in horror as they turned them into more crystal creatures. "Even if you're right," he said, "how do we get to the lab?" "They're everywhere." Miller pointed to her map again. "They're avoiding the lab and the area around it. If we can get close enough." Another explosion rocked the bunker. This one took out some of the lights, leaving them in partial darkness. The musical voice of the crystal beings echoed through the tunnels. "We sense you. Accept our gift." Walker checked his weapon, more out of habit than hope. "How sure are you about this theory?" Miller gathered her papers quickly. "About 80%. And the other 20%. She shrugged. "We die horribly, and humanity becomes crystal sculptures forever." Walker laughed despite himself. "Well, when you put it that way." He helped her pack her research. "How do we get out of here?" Miller pointed to an old maintenance tunnel on her map. "That leads to the surface. If we hurry, we might make it before." The bunker door began to melt. "Time to go," Walker said, grabbing Miller's bag. "Let's hope you're right about this observation thing." They ran for the tunnel as the first crystal beings entered the bunker. Behind them, the musical voice called out, "Your resistance is fascinating. It will make your preservation even more perfect." But for the first time since the invasion began, humanity had a plan. The old quantum lab stood silent in the mountain shadows. Captain Walker and Dr. Miller approached carefully. watching for any sign of crystal beings. Their 3-day journey through back roads and forests had left them exhausted but alive. "It looks abandoned," Walker said, checking the entrance with his flashlight. "Good," Miller replied, pulling equipment from her backpack. "That means they really are avoiding this place." They entered the lab carefully. Emergency lights cast a dim glow over dusty equipment and dark screens. Miller went straight to the main computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Yes," she exclaimed. "The quantum measurement chambers are still working." Walker kept watch at the door. "How long until you can build this observer device?" "That's the hard part." Miller opened several panels, revealing complex machinery. "We need to modify these chambers to focus human consciousness instead of just measuring it. And we need test subjects." A radio crackled to life nearby, making them both jump. "This is Major Richards, Earth Defense Force. Any survivors out there?" Walker grabbed the radio. "Richards, this is Captain Walker. We thought everyone from command was dead." "Not yet," Richards replied. "Got about 50 people with me. We've been hiding in the mine systems. Where are you?" Miller grabbed the radio. "Major, this is Dr. Miller. Are any of your people scientists, engineers?" "About a dozen. Why?" Miller smiled. "Because we're going to need help building something impossible." Over the next week, survivors trickled into the lab. Engineers worked on Miller's designs while soldiers set up defenses. They modified the quantum chambers, linking them together in a circle around a central platform. "The theory is simple," Miller explained to the gathered group. "Each pod will hold one person. Their consciousness will be focused through these crystals, ironically, similar to what the beings are made of, and directed at the target." "What happens then?" someone asked. Miller pointed to her calculations on a whiteboard. "Together, our minds should force them to pick one state of being. No more quantum immortality. No more perfect healing." "Should." Major Richards didn't look convinced. "We need a test subject," Miller said. "A captured crystal being." The room went quiet. Capturing one seemed impossible. Walker stood up. "I have an idea. They can sense us, right? So let's give them something to sense." The plan was dangerous but simple. They set up equipment that mimicked human brain patterns a few miles from the lab. Within hours, 3 crystal beings appeared to investigate. "Now," Walker ordered through his radio. Hidden soldiers fired special nets, not to hurt the beings, but to tangle them. While 2 crystal beings easily flowed through the nets, the third got caught just long enough. A hidden panel opened beneath it, dropping the creature into a reinforced container. They rushed the container back to the lab. The crystal being inside pulsed with light, its musical voice echoing. "Your tricks are meaningless. We cannot be contained." Miller worked quickly, powering up the modified chambers. "Everyone to your pods. Remember, focus your thoughts on the target. Imagine it becoming fixed, solid, unchanging." 20 people entered the pods, including Walker, Richards, and Miller. The captured being watched with what almost seemed like curiosity. "Your primitive attempts at understanding us will fail," it said. "We are perfect." Miller activated the system. Energy hummed through the crystals. In the center, the captured beam began to shimmer. "Focus," Miller shouted. "Everyone focus." Walker stared at the creature, concentrating harder than he ever had before. He felt something strange, like his mind was stretching, reaching out, touching others. The crystal being's glow intensified. Its musical voice rose to a high pitch. What is happening?" For the first time, the being's voice showed emotion. Fear. Its perfect crystal form began to cloud. Cracks appeared, not healing instantly like before. The being tried to shift forms, but couldn't. "Stop," it cried. "You are limiting us, fixing us. We cannot." The being's form solidified completely, becoming cloudy white crystal. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, it shattered. Miller shut down the system quickly. Everyone stumbled from their pods, staring at the broken crystal pieces on the floor. "It worked," Miller whispered. "It actually worked." Walker picked up a crystal shard. "We can hurt them. We can fight back." But their victory was interrupted by distant explosions. Through the lab windows, they saw crystal ships appearing in the sky. "They know," Richards said grimly. "They're coming." The real battle was about to begin. Alarms blared through the quantum lab as crystal ships filled the sky. Dr. Miller worked frantically at her computer, while Captain Walker and Major Richards organized the defenses. "We need more time," Miller said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "The observer device isn't ready for full power yet." "How long?" Walker asked, watching the crystal ships through his binoculars. "An hour, maybe two." She looked up at the approaching fleet. "They're moving slower than usual, almost like they're afraid." Richards laughed. "They should be. We just killed one of their immortal soldiers." The radio crackled with reports from their lookouts. Crystal beings were landing in the valleys below, but keeping their distance from the lab. Their usual confident advance had changed to a cautious approach. "They're learning," Walker said. "They know we can hurt them now." Miller pointed to her screens. "Look at their formation. They're staying spread out, making it harder to focus on any one of them. They're adapting." A musical voice echoed across the valley, louder than they'd ever heard before. "Your resistance is impressive, but futile. We are countless. We are eternal. You cannot observe us all." Walker turned to Miller. "Can we use the device again?" She shook her head. "Not at full power, but—" She paused, thinking. "We might be able to try something else. Get everyone to their pods." As soldiers and scientists rushed to their positions, Miller explained her plan. "We can't destroy them all, but we can create a barrier. If enough of us focus our observation, we might be able to force them to stay solid in a certain area." "Like a wall?" Richards asked. "Like a bubble," Miller corrected. "A sphere of fixed quantum states. Inside it, they'll have to stay solid. They won't be able to flow through walls or heal instantly." The crystal beings were getting closer. Their bodies glowed brighter than ever, pulsing with stored energy from all the weapons that had failed to stop them. "Everyone ready?" Miller called through the intercom. "Focus on creating a boundary. Imagine a wall of solid reality pushing out from the lab." She activated the device. The linked pods hummed with power as 20 minds focused together. Through the windows, they watched as a ripple moved through the air, like heat waves on a hot road. The nearest crystal beings hit this invisible barrier and stopped. Their bodies tried to flow forward but couldn't pass through. More and more of them pressed against the boundary, their musical voices rising in confusion. "It's working," Walker shouted. But Miller frowned at her readings. "Something's wrong. The power drain is too high. We can't maintain this for long." The crystal beings began to press harder against the barrier. Their bodies glowed intensely as they tried to force their way through. The device's humming turned to a high-pitched whine. "Miller," Richards called out. "My pod is overheating." "They're attacking the barrier directly," Miller said, typing rapidly, "using their combined energy to disrupt our effect. Everyone focus harder. We can't let them through." Walker felt sweat running down his face as he concentrated. The barrier was visible now, a shimmering wall of force pushing back against a sea of crystal beings. But he could feel it weakening. With a sound like shattering glass, the first crystal being broke through. Its body was different now, partially solidified, moving slower, but still advancing. Behind it, more began to break through the weakening barrier. "Shut it down," Walker ordered. "Save the power for the main device." Miller deactivated the pods. Everyone stumbled out, exhausted from the mental effort. Through the windows, they watched the crystal army advance, moving slower but unstoppable. "Well," Richards said grimly, checking his useless weapon, "that didn't work." But Miller was smiling. "Actually, it did. Look at them. They're not healing as fast. Their forms are more solid. We affected them. Walker understood. So the full power device. Miller nodded. Will be even stronger. But we need more people. Many more. The musical voice echoed again. Your resistance has shown us new possibilities. Your preservation will make us even more perfect. Walker grabbed the radio. This is Captain Walker to all surviving human forces. We need everyone. Everyone who can still fight. Everyone who can still think. We have a way to stop them, but we need you. All of you. The fate of humanity would depend on how many answered his call. 3 days after Walker's call for help, the mountain roads filled with survivors. They came in trucks, on foot, and in whatever vehicles still worked. Military helicopters brought more people, landing on every flat space around the lab. Dr. Miller watched the crowd grow from the lab's roof, hope rising in her chest. How many? She asked as Captain Walker joined her. Over 1,000 now, he said. More coming every hour. These are just the ones who could reach us. Major Richards appeared from the stairwell. Bad news. Crystal ships are gathering in orbit. More than we've ever seen. The Eternal are calling their whole army here. Below them, engineers worked frantically to build more observer pods, connecting them to the central device. The original 20 pods had grown to hundreds, filling every space in and around the lab. Will it be enough? Walker asked Miller. She checked her tablet. The device's power grows exponentially with each connected mind. 1,000 observers should be. She paused, calculating. Should be enough to affect several miles of space. A soldier rushed up to them. Sir, message from our spotters. The crystal beings. They're all moving. Every group on Earth is heading this way. Walker nodded grimly. They know this is it. The final battle. They gathered everyone in the valley below the lab. Soldiers, scientists, civilians, all the remaining free humans in the area. Miller stood on a makeshift platform to address them. Each of you will enter an observer pod, she explained. Together, our minds will create a field of fixed quantum states. The crystal beings won't be able to shift forms or heal inside it. But we only have one chance, one shot to end this. The sky darkened as crystal ships blocked the sun. Their musical voice boomed across the valley. Your species shows remarkable unity. Join us willingly. Become perfect. Get to your pods, Walker ordered. People rushed to their assigned positions. Every pod was filled. Soldiers next to civilians, scientists beside farmers. Everyone who could still fight, united in one last stand. Miller ran final checks on the device. Power levels holding. Neural links stable. We're as ready as we'll ever be. The first wave of crystal beings appeared on the ridges around them. Thousands of them, their bodies glowing like stars. Behind them, more ships arrived, disgorging endless streams of crystalline soldiers. They're trying to overwhelm us with numbers, Richards said. Even if each person can affect a few of them. It's not about numbers, Miller interrupted. It's about observation collapse. Once it starts, it should cascade through their whole connected network. Walker took his place in a pod, like dominoes. Miller managed a small smile, like a wave of reality crashing through their quantum uncertainty. The crystal army advanced, not rushing, but moving with inevitable purpose. Their voices joined in a deafening chorus. We are eternal. We are perfect. We are forever. Now, Miller shouted, activating the device. 1,000 pods hummed to life. 1,000 minds focused their thoughts, their consciousness, their very understanding of reality onto the crystal beings. The air itself seemed to vibrate. The front rank of crystal beings stopped. Their perfect forms began to cloud, like ice forming on clear glass. They tried to shift, to flow, to change, but couldn't. More power. Miller called. Everyone focus. Don't let up. Walker concentrated harder than he ever had before. He felt other minds around him, all pushing together. The clouding effect spread through the crystal ranks like a wave. No, the musical voice held real fear now. What are you? How are you? The wave of quantum collapse reached the ships above. They began to fall, their perfect geometric shapes becoming clouded, solid, fixed. The battle for humanity's survival had reached its turning point, but no one knew if their minds could hold out long enough to finish what they'd started. The quantum lab hummed with power as 1,000 minds focused their consciousness through the observer device. Crystal beings across the valley were freezing, their perfect forms becoming clouded and solid. But the strain on the human observers was enormous. "Hold on," Dr. Miller shouted through the intercom. "The cascade effect is building." Captain Walker sat in his pod, sweat running down his face as he concentrated. He could feel other minds around him, all pushing together, all forcing reality to become fixed and certain. Through the pod's window, he watched crystal ships falling from the sky, their eternal forms becoming simply solid matter. "The power readings are off the charts," Miller reported. "The effect is spreading faster than they can retreat." The musical voice of the crystal beings rose in a desperate chorus. "Stop. You don't understand what you're doing. Without quantum uncertainty, we cannot exist as we are." "That's the point," Major Richards growled from his pod. More crystal ships appeared above, trying to rescue their trapped companions. But as soon as they entered the effect field, they too began to solidify. Their perfect geometric shapes clouded over, becoming simple crystal structures that obeyed normal physics. Without their quantum nature, they fell like rocks. "Something's happening," Miller called out. "The effect, it's moving through their network. They're all connected." Walker saw it too. The quantum collapse was spreading like a shockwave through the crystal army. Each being was linked to the others, and as they fell into fixed states, they pulled their companions with them. The wave of reality rushed outward, up through the atmosphere and into space. "We can't maintain this power level much longer," Miller warned. "People are passing out in their pods." But the crystal beings were panicking now. Their musical voice became discordant. "No, we chose quantum existence to escape entropy, to become perfect. We cannot go back to being limited." Walker pushed harder, focusing his thoughts. "Keep going. We're almost there." The air filled with a sound like shattering glass, multiplied 1,000,000 times. Crystal ships fell from the sky in waves, their once immortal crews now trapped in single, solid forms. The quantum collapse cascade reached the main fleet in orbit, visible as flashes of light in the darkened sky. Then, suddenly, silence. Miller's voice came through the intercom, tired but excited. "It's done. The effect has spread through their entire network. Every crystal being connected to their quantum field has been normalized." The pods powered down. Exhausted humans stumbled out, looking at the valley now littered with clouded crystal fragments and fallen ships. The pieces still glowed faintly, but they no longer shifted or flowed. They were just crystal now, nothing more. Walker helped Miller down from her control station. "Did we kill them?" She shook her head. "No, we just made them real. Made them part of normal space-time again. They're still alive, but they're not immortal anymore. They have to exist in one state, just like us." A new sound filled the air, different from the musical voice they'd known. More humble, more natural. From the crystal debris came words. "We remember how it was before, when we were like you, when we changed and grew and lived in time." The transformed crystal beings were rising, their bodies still beautiful, but no longer perfect, no longer eternal. One approached Walker and Miller, its crystalline form now fixed in a single shape. "We forgot," it said. "In seeking perfection, we forgot what it meant to be alive, to change, to grow. You have given us back uncertainty, given us back possibility, given you back humanity," Miller said softly. The being nodded. "We will leave your world, return to space. We have much to relearn. About change, about time, about being truly alive." Walker watched as the transformed crystal beings gathered their fallen ships and companions. "Think they'll be back?" Miller smiled. Maybe. But next time, they'll come as friends, not conquerors. After all, she looked at the tired but proud humans around them. We taught them something even quantum immortality couldn't give them. What's that? That the most perfect thing in the universe isn't unchanging crystal, she said. It's life itself, in all its wonderful uncertainty. Above them, the sun broke through the clouds, shining on a world that had faced extinction and discovered its greatest strength, the power of human consciousness itself.